Every single day, you wake up and unconsciously begin to think the same thoughts. Those thoughts create the same feelings. And those feelings, whether it's fear, anger, guilt, or unworthiness, become so familiar that you begin to need them, just to feel like yourself. You don't even realize it, but you're not just feeling emotions, you're reliving the past chemically. The body, which is the unconscious mind, has memorized suffering, and it's now running the show. So the real question isn't why you feel stressed, anxious, or sad. The question is, are you addicted to those emotions, and are they keeping you stuck in the same life? Because if your personality creates your personal reality, and your personality is built from those same emotions you keep recycling, then in order to change your life, you must break the emotional addiction. And today, that's exactly what we're going to do.
Every emotion we experience creates a chemical reaction in the body. When we feel anger, sadness, guilt, or fear, those emotions release specific chemicals, hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, that the body becomes used to over time. Just like any substance, these chemicals can become familiar and even addictive. The body starts to crave the emotional states that produce them, not because they're good for us, but because they're familiar. The more we repeat a certain emotional experience, the more the body gets conditioned to it. Eventually, we're no longer reacting to the external environment. We're reacting to our internal chemical state. In other words, the body becomes the mind. When this happens, we're no longer consciously choosing our emotional responses. Instead, we're automatically reliving the past. A person might wake up feeling anxious without anything specific happening that day. But the body, conditioned by years of anxiety, demands that familiar chemical hit. So the brain finds something, anything to worry about, just to keep the emotional addiction going. It becomes a loop. The emotion reinforces the thought, and the thought reinforces the emotion. The body, addicted to the chemicals of the past, signals the brain to keep thinking the same way, ensuring the addiction stays alive. This is why change is so difficult. Even when we intellectually know we want to feel better, the body resists. It craves what it knows. It doesn't care whether the emotion is painful or limiting. It only cares that it's predictable. Predictability equals survival. And so, without even realizing it, we stay trapped in an emotional identity that was built from past experiences, long after those experiences are over. The emotions become our personality. They become who we think we are. And that identity keeps creating the same reality over and over again.
Thoughts and emotions are deeply interconnected, constantly feeding off each other in a self-reinforcing cycle. When you think a negative thought, something like, "I'm not good enough," or "nothing ever works out for me," that thought produces a chemical reaction in the brain, which in turn creates a feeling. That feeling might be sadness, frustration, or fear. Once you begin to feel that emotion, the brain takes notice and starts thinking more thoughts equal to that emotional state. The feeling validates the thought, and the thought validates the feeling. This is how a feedback loop is created. Over time, this loop becomes automatic. You might begin each day already anticipating stress, already expecting disappointment, and those expectations are not just mental, they're emotional. The emotions prepare the body for what the mind assumes is coming, even if nothing in the external world has happened yet. The body is living in the past, reacting to memories rather than the present moment. The brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined, so the emotional response becomes just as intense whether the threat is real or only remembered. This is why so many people feel like they're stuck. It's not just their thoughts keeping them there, it's the emotions that follow. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. You can try to think positively for a moment, but if the emotional addiction is still running in the background, the body will pull the mind back to the familiar state. The feedback loop makes it incredibly hard to step outside the emotional identity that has been reinforced over years. And the longer this loop continues, the more deeply ingrained the emotional state becomes, until it starts to feel like an unchangeable part of who you are.
Your personality is not something fixed or permanent. It is a combination of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. These three elements form a consistent pattern that defines your identity. Over time, if you keep thinking the same thoughts, making the same choices, and feeling the same emotions, you end up hardwiring that pattern into your brain and body. That becomes your personality. And your personality is what creates your personal reality. In other words, the life you experience outside of you is a reflection of the patterns you've been running inside of you. If you constantly live in survival emotions like fear, anger, or guilt, then those emotions shape your perception of the world. You'll interpret experiences through the lens of those emotions, reinforcing the belief that life is hard, people can't be trusted, or that you're not enough. These beliefs drive your behavior. Your behavior reinforces your identity, and your identity limits what you believe is possible. It becomes a loop where your external reality matches your internal state, and you keep getting the same outcomes over and over again. People often try to change their life by changing the external, new job, new relationship, new city, but they stay the same inside. So even if the environment changes, the emotional and mental patterns stay the same, and eventually, the new life starts to look like the old one. That's because real change happens from the inside out. You have to change the thoughts you think, the actions you take, and most importantly, the emotions you feel on a daily basis. When you shift your inner state, you shift your energy. And when you shift your energy, you begin to draw a new personal reality that matches the new personality you are becoming. The past lives in the body as much as it does in the mind. Every emotional experience you've ever had leaves an imprint. And when those experiences are strong enough, trauma, heartbreak, rejection, or failure, they become memorized in the form of feelings. Over time, those emotions hardwire into your biology. You don't just remember the past mentally, you feel it physically. Even if your conscious mind wants to move forward, your body is still living in the emotional signature of yesterday. This is why people often repeat the same patterns. They're not just thinking from the past, they're feeling from it. If you wake up in the morning and instantly feel the same emotions you've carried for years, frustration, anxiety, loneliness, then the body is already operating in a familiar past. Those emotions trigger the same thoughts, which lead to the same choices, which lead to the same behaviors, and those behaviors create the same experiences. You stay stuck not because you're incapable of change, but because you haven't emotionally detached from who you used to be. The identity built on the pain, the betrayal, the stress, it becomes who you think you are, even though it's just a memory. And as long as those feelings dominate your internal state, they'll shape the lens through which you see every moment of your life. To truly change, you must interrupt the pattern. You must teach the body that the past is no longer relevant. This isn't about denying what happened. It's about no longer giving it permission to define you. When you begin to observe your emotional triggers without reacting to them, you take your power back from the memory. The more you practice this awareness, the more you loosen the grip of the old emotions, allowing space for new ones to emerge, ones that align with the future you want to create.
Awareness is the first step toward any real transformation. Most people move through life in a state of unconscious repetition, living the same day over and over again, reacting to the same people, situations, and emotions as if they have no control. But the moment you become aware of your emotional state, when you can observe yourself getting irritated, fearful, or sad without automatically reacting,
That's the moment you begin to separate from the old self. That awareness creates a space between who you've been and who you're capable of becoming. In that space is the power to choose something different. Once you become aware, the next step is to generate elevated emotions intentionally. Emotions like gratitude, love, joy, and inspiration have a different frequency than survival emotions. They expand the heart and calm the brain, creating coherence between the heart and mind. When you're in a state of coherence, you are more connected to the present moment, and from that place, you can begin to design your future consciously. Elevated emotions signal the body that a new future is already happening. The body doesn't know the difference between a real experience and one that's vividly imagined with emotion. So when you feel elevated feelings as if your future is already real, you are reconditioning your body to a new mind. It's not enough to just think positively or visualize outcomes. The true change happens when your thoughts and feelings are aligned. When your intention is clear and your emotion is elevated, you begin to rewire your brain and reprogram your body for a new state of being. Practice makes this familiar. With enough repetition, the new emotional state becomes the new normal. That's how you begin to teach your body to live in the future instead of being addicted to the emotions of the past.